I've often seen that people are aware that, hey, I need to improve my strength, I need to improve my flexibility, balance, breathing, whatever, right? And therefore the cognitive agility multiplies. But still, I don't see people or leaders looking at all of it in a very holistic way. Either they are completely into endurance by practicing to do a marathon, which of course is not so often these days. But so there is one dimension that gets more, more attention to, and people are missing out on other things. So, what's your advice for leaders there, Marcel?
Fantastic question. And actually, one of the assessments that I developed when I was writing my thesis was kind of what I was researching back in those days was actually the relationship between a leader's fitness level and their brain function and their brain capacity, as I call it, their capacity to make decisions, speed of processing, and all of these kind of things. And what's interesting about the research, and it's only really just starting to emerge, but even if you look at a lot of the research done on brain function and exercise has really been done in the cardiovascular space. And that's not because cardiovascular exercise is the only form of exercise that builds brain function, right. But it's because it provides the quickest results. And so when universities and these kind of places are actually doing research, they want to have kind of these quick processes where they can kind of write their papers and do all of these kind of things. So it's much more tempting for the scientific world to actually focus on things like cardiovascular exercise and stuff like that. Now, slowly but surely, there are some other research studies that are coming up where we're looking at other forms of exercise and brain function, and that I find really fascinating, because one of my theories, even back in the day, and you're talking 10, 11 years ago, I actually developed a kind of a training and exercise programming for brain function. And what I even noticed back then in those preliminary days was that different forms of exercise target different areas in the brain. They target different executive functions. Wow. So it's not just a matter of saying, hey, listen, I'm gonna run, let's say I'm gonna do long distance running because that's gonna oxygenate my brain for the most part. Yes, that's true, but there are parts of the brain that really need flexing, just like the muscles. Just when you go into the gym, for example, you don't only train your biceps and then think that you're going to kind of have an overall great looking physique, right? So hopefully anyway. And the same thing counts in the brain. We have to be aware of, kind of say, hey, what aspects of the brain do we really want to be triggering, and what forms of exercise do we want to do? And so for example, if we want to, there's an area in the brain, it's called the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. Yes. And that part of the brain is responsible for impulse inhibition. And basically that means that if you're a leader and you have a tendency to be a little bit impulsive, maybe even wear your emotions on your sleeve, having a bit of an impulse inhibition muscle that becomes a little bit stronger, it can be really important, because that's that component of the brain that stops you from losing your temper. It stops you from making emotional decisions too quickly or anything, allows you to reflect a little bit more, gives a little bit more patience and all of those kind of things. That part of the brain is trained for the most part through strength training. So when we do resistance training, especially heavy resistance training, those neurons get fired up way more than, for example, regular cardiovascular exercise, especially the cardiovascular exercise that's comfortable. If a person did cardiovascular exercise, but they did kind of that high intensity sprint training, what they call HIIT training, that would probably trigger it as well, but much more so in kind of in strength training and all of that kind of stuff. The same thing counts with the emotional centers in the brain. The emotional centers in the brain also respond differently to exercise, right? So for example, understanding that emotional processing, if you think about it, 85% of the word emotion is dedicated to movement, right? Emotion. So there's an understanding that if I move my body, it's going to trigger certain type of emotional processes. Right. And so there are certain ways of exercising that trigger certain emotional ways, or ways that we process our emotions in different ways. And so so that would be more, you can think more of like the yogas and the Tai Chis and all of these kind of things, which really plays a lot in that emotional regulation and kind of that holistic kind of self-awareness space, mindfulness, and all of those kind of things. So there are all of these different forms of exercises that I believe in the future are really going to, kind of be identified as, hey, if you want this specific form of brain function, that form of exercise is best for you. And I find that really, really exciting. I think that's going to be an interesting space that we go into, rather than just kind of doing the same thing over and over again and thinking that there's this one size fits all for that whole brain. That's
Correct.
just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Correct.